Hi there to our Capital H listeners. This episode is brought to you live from the Transform Conference in Las Vegas, where we explore the latest in HR innovation and leadership. Joining me today is Brian Little, the Chief People Officer at Altera. Brian has played a pivotal role in shaping HR strategy within dynamic and evolving business environments across a number of companies. In this episode, we'll dive into Brian's career journey, his experience as a Chief People Officer during a corporate carve-out, and his insights into scaling an HR function from the ground up. We'll also discuss key lessons for HR leaders navigating similar transformations and explore the latest trends shaping the future of HR. Brian, thanks so much for being here today. To start, can you introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners, share a little bit about what led you to being a Chief People Officer at Altera?
You know, all things actually work together. Sometimes you don't really understand how that comes about, but it does. So when I went to college, I thought I was going to be a computer science major. So I like computers and I was trying to spend time with that. But I was in this class and this professor had this unique approach to creating computerized speeches. So it was fascinating to me to hear him talk about it. And as I started to listen to him, he said, hey, I need some graduate students and some undergraduate students to work with me just to do, because I can't pay anybody, and I need to go work on this project. And it turned out to be this super cool project where we were listening to, think about as future voters, go through something called a Q-sort analysis. And as they went through that, it was fascinating because all of a sudden you could create this new speech that a politician could use that would actually touch audiences the most. I changed my major after that because I wanted to spend more time with him and be able to do more work around that. And so ultimately, I got out of school with a degree in communications, and then I went to graduate school. I thought I was going to be a college professor, but I changed my mind. I met this wonderful woman who has now been my wife for many years, and I kept thinking, I actually need to make a little bit more money than I was as a college professor. So I went into business, and I started off in operations, but I was still really hit with that bug of how to do things with people more than just things. And I had a chance to work in the management assessment center at the company I was working at. It was a big utility company. And I was fascinated because you do these really cool things to understand what would make great managers and managers not so great. But also the CEO of the company would come and talk to me about some of the test results and what did I see.
Sure.
Now, I was pretty young, early in my career. And what job would a CEO of a good-sized company come and talk to me about? Certainly not my operations job. So this was really a great thing for me. And I really said, wow, this could be impactful. Let me think about going into more of the human capital side. So I went into learning and development after assessment. I became an HR generalist. I did a lot of recruiting, did a lot of, you name it, training and those kinds of things. But I was always drawn back to trying to figure out how to help managers and executives be better. So I went to a company called Amico, and Amico had this management institute. I worked there as faculty and also as some of the generalists worked there. Later on, I went to go work for a company called Ameritech, and Ameritech's now part of AT&T. And I also worked at the Ameritech Institute as faculty. I ran something that you think about as corporate team building, corporate assessments, and then working across what we would call workout. And it's just a little bit like how GE used to do it. We kind of stole from that, and we took those ideas and put them in place. But it was great. I decided to become a consultant afterwards because I work with so many consultants, kept thinking, that's a cool thing. Let me try that. And I did that for a while, and I did it for about 3 years, and I really loved it. But I traveled all the time and had young children, and I wanted to work at one of my clients. So I went to go work at a company. It was called HFC at the time I joined, but it became HSBC soon after that. And then at HSBC, I really got on think about it as my CPO track. I started off as not on the learning space, but I quickly moved from the learning space to becoming an HR director, then an HR vice president, then an HR senior vice president. Ultimately, I wanted to make a change. I went to go work for a company called Zurich Insurance Group, and I wound up being the chief people officer of the Americas there. And that was a great experience. Also wanting change down the road because the theme is there. You don't grow unless you try some new things. I wanted to work in technology, and I came to join Intel as the head of HR for our corporate groups in Latin America. Ultimately, I moved on to a part of the company that was data center and artificial intelligence because I really wanted to be in the deep world of all the scientists and everything else that we had there. So it was a great experience. Sandra Rivera, who's the CEO of the company I work for now called Altera, actually led that group. And then when she went over to lead the Altera team, she chose me as our chief people officer there.
Brian, thank you for sharing that background and context. And I will say you can still be a college professor later, right? You can take some of those learnings that you've had from a corporate perspective, maybe as an adjunct down the line or something, because the journey that you just described I think is an important one within the field of HR, right? You've covered all the domains, you've been across industries and sectors, but you also had that operations background to begin with. And here at Transform, where their tagline is talking about the future of people and work, so much of that dialogue is also understanding what are those business outcomes, those work outcomes that organizations are trying to drive, and what is the people strategy tied to that. So, Brian, you shared with Sandra becoming the CEO of Altera, that being as a part of a carve out from Intel, becoming an independent subsidiary within Intel. Can you share a little bit about what was your thought process around talking to Sandra about the Chief People Officer opportunity and then thinking about how do you join a company that's building fresh, building new, and what that Chief People Officer journey would look like?
Well, for me, it was a great opportunity because I've always been on the other side of that equation as part of a corporation or working in a consulting role, helping somebody build out their company and working through that.
Sure.
In this case, I'd have it end to end. And this is what was exciting to me. I could really think about what it could be, what are the possibilities, but I have a lot of experience in really great HR orgs and what they've done, and also with companies that sometimes were really struggling, trying to figure it out. And you bring all that together in a company like Altera, which was breaking away from a super established, well-known company to be on its own. And that was an intriguing opportunity for me. And Sandra's background and my background really meshed well. Sandra had her own business. She was an entrepreneur early in her career. I had my own business for a while doing my consulting work. And we just kind of thought about what it could be in terms of culture, in terms of outcomes, and just the trials and tribulations that you go through with launching a new company. And it's been all of that. It's been a great ride.
Well, and Brian, I think one of those things, there's many folks who look for Chief People Officer opportunities that involves building and scaling. But most frequently, that's probably in the startup world. You're now funded by venture capital, funded by private equity or something along those lines, versus as part of a carve out, your point, you were part of an established company. It's a different starting place. The fact that Sandra from the beginning is focused on some of the people and talent and culture topics and thinking about the workforce strategy to ultimately deliver on her strategy as a CEO is probably no better starting place for you and for the C-suite. So can you share a little bit about you decided to take on the role? How do you then engage with Sandra and team to say, what's the right strategy for us, Altera, as we think about ourselves as an independent business going forward?
Well, first we thought about what culture do we want to have? Sandra believes that culture is a secret weapon, and as do I. And we thought about here's the culture of Intel and what it is. And by the way, Intel is one of the greatest companies ever. And if you think about it over a long period of time, it's done some incredible things. We wanted to borrow a little bit from that, but we knew that we couldn't duplicate that. We couldn't go out and say, we're going to carve it out. It's going to be exactly like Intel. So what we did was we focused on learning from those experiences, but moving to that next level of what independence looks like and what would the world be apart from Intel. There are some great things that we're going to always carry with us, but there are also lots of new opportunities, a chance to be a little less bureaucratic because it's smaller, a chance to be a little bit more focused on a specific customer set.
Sure.
We didn't have to look as quite as broad as like a company like Intel does. And then being able to create unique experiences for employees so they can continue to grow and learn and be able to stretch themselves that sometimes you can't do in a really big company. So we're able to do that. We're pretty lucky because we weren't starting off in somebody's garage. And by the way, for those who started off in a garage and done really well, more power to you.
Yeah.
That's great stuff. But in this case, we didn't start that way. We started as a company that was partially together. Now, there's some ups with that, but there are also some downs with that. I would say the great part is we didn't have to go out and borrow a bunch of money day one and spend our time on that. But at the same time, we had this really established culture that we're trying to break away from too, without, to a certain degree, demeaning that old culture, but being able to move forward with the new culture in a way that's great. And I think we started that and we're on that journey. We don't get it perfect every time because one of the things that you learn, at least I think you learn when you're in this type of opportunity is you're going to do some things like incredibly right, but you're also going to do some things you're going to go, wow, that's a head scratcher. How do we get there?
Yep.
And the good thing is you get to fix it. When it's not perfect, you just turn around and look up and say, I think I can do it better. And then the next day you start again. And that's been a real pleasure to be able to think about what's going on right, what's going on that could be better, and then actually do something about it and see those results really quickly.
Yeah. Well, and Brian, I think to your point, sometimes change just requires people to be in a little bit of a dynamic environment and also say, in a carve-out type of situation, we can honor the past. We were part of a great company. And that great company's business strategy has changed broadly, hence why we're embarking on this new journey. So let's honor the past while focusing on the future and where do we go next, right? And that can become kind of a rallying cry, not only for the executive team, but for the workforce at large, because now we've got a bit more of a focused mission that we can go do some very impactful things for businesses and for the end customers. And Brian, you touched a little bit on maybe some of the things you have to navigate in that environment. There's also some hypothesis that I think corporate carve-outs and divestitures are perhaps on the rise across industries and sectors as some other larger companies start to streamline. So for other HR leaders who might end up in that situation, like you did, stepping into a chief people officer role as part of a carve-out, any kind of key lessons learned or things that you think they should consider before they embark on that journey?
Yes, you really have to think about the thesis of why you're doing it. It has to be crystal clear why you're making this change, because that's going to help you survive all that thrash that comes about. Because remember, people are part of another organization that had its own thesis, and that may be great, but it might be completely different on what you need to do in the future.
Yep.
Spending time on that, helping people walk through it, particularly for people who've been part of the old organization for a long time, they have it drilled into them. So you have to kind of help them understand why this change is important, why this journey is one worth being on, and really be able to help people walk through each of those phases. By the way, they don't always get there at the same time. Just like any model of change, and I'm sure a lot of you out there are experts in this, you know that people go through the change process in different ways and different times. You have to be cognizant of that and continually have communication with employees. And also be okay that sometimes you have to stand up and say things that people are like, you know what, I don't really like that change. But be able to stand up and say, hey, it's for the betterment of the company. Eventually, I believe most people come around, but also sometimes it's not the best fit for people and they need to either find something different, maybe they go back to the old company or even a new job. But the vast majority of people get excited about this new mission and they get excited about what it can do for them from a career perspective.
Yep.
And then also something that's bigger than themselves, being able to hook to a mission about changing the world, to be able to help innovators, to be able to help people do things that we can only have imagined 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Being part of that and seeing that come to life is super exciting. We want to get people on that. So as a chief people officer, I have to sell that mission every day. I have to get people excited about our business every day. And I also have to help people when we do something clunky, they go, wow. I remind them like, remember, all this company has been around in its one shape or form. It really is a new company.
Yeah.
And because it's a new company, there are things that go clunk in the middle of the night. And what I mean by that metaphor is some days, no matter how well you work things out, it just doesn't happen the way you think it should. But you don't have as many people as maybe the larger company to go add a problem and fix it.
Yep.
But that also is the exciting part because people get to stretch themselves and do things that maybe they hadn't had a chance to do before. People get a chance to try new systems. They get a chance to try to create new policies. They get a chance to be much more closer to employees. They get a chance to just stretch themselves enough that, wow, even though it might be a little bit painful at times, it's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think part of the thing that you learn over time is that without that stretch, we really just don't grow enough in our career.
Yep.
And sometimes it's a little bit scary, but that's where, as a chief people officer, I help reinforce that, hey, from time to time, you're going to make mistakes because it's new.
Yeah.
But there are good mistakes and there's bad mistakes. Good mistakes are effort's great. You're really trying to work at it, but it didn't turn out as well as you like. But that's what coachable moments for people. We want to help them through that time frame and be able to do some new stuff. So this becomes pretty exciting. On my team, I've stretched everybody. Everybody is doing a little bit more than what they probably thought they would be doing.
Sure.
And I think that's really helped. Our turnover is almost nil, and we're getting people pretty excited about the new things they can try.
Yeah. Brian, part of your message there as well for folks in a startup environment, when you are truly building from scratch, people expect, hey, we're building from scratch, therefore not everything's going to work. In a carve out, you are also, to a certain extent, building from scratch because you're building from a new company, even though, yes, you might be able to leverage some things from the broader parent company, but now you're independent. Now you have to do it with something that's right-sized, fit for purpose for the smaller entity. So there might be some things that go bump or clunk in year one that weren't going clunk back at the parent company, but it's part of that journey, right? And how then do you level set on those expectations for leaders, managers, workers, et cetera, for all this being part of that new and exciting business? So, Brian, one of the things I also wanted to kind of get your take on, you're here at Transform, you're on a panel, you got a number of topics that you're digging into. And so as you look forward, for the people function, the HR function, talent function, whatever an organization may call it. What are some of the trends you see on the horizon that you think folks really need to pay attention to?
I would say automation and AI are two things that people really have to start thinking through.
Sure.
And what I mean by that, they're not exactly the same because automation, you think about it, is a way to take processes that are pretty stable and you want to be able to figure out, can I automate that a little bit? Can I program it out? Can I make sure that it works? AI is really different because we don't really understand it quite as well. And we're working through how it can be an advantage not only to a company, to our employees, to customers, but really being able to create a scenario where it really learns from the experiences. The AI is a tool that really helps employees be able to think more about what's important, like in terms of serving their customers or doing some new projects or really beating some timelines versus some of the things that are pretty routine and basic, but complicated enough. A simple answer doesn't work all the time. AI helps us get to those kinds of things. And I do think it's very promising, but we're still out there for trying to figure this out. It is not perfect yet.
Yep.
Some days I think about our AI tools as some of the most smartest things that are out there. And other times it's pretty dumb. And usually there's not that much in between. So we're working on it, but much like how the world changed over time when I started working and to where it is today, it is exponential the amount of change that's going to come.
Yeah.
So hopefully, as people are here at Transform, they really are thinking about how do I transform myself in this brave new world that's out there that is going to be not only fun, but frightening at times as well. Every now and then, it'll wake you up in the middle of the night and you'll go, oh my. But at the same time, it'll make you feel like I can do almost anything. And we'll get better at this as a function. We'll get better at talking to our leaders about how AI is going to help us. But we have to be a little bit more creative. Going to business leaders and saying, hey, we'll be able to have 3 less FTE because of AI is not the most exciting message that a leader wants to hear.
Yep.
A leader wants to hear that you're going to help transform my business. We're going to do better. There's something that's super important to our customers. We're going to be able to do more because of AI. That's the message that we have to bring to the table. But we have to understand it better ourselves. We can't be afraid of it as an HR function. And we have to think about how do we embrace it and then be able to really create an atmosphere that allows us to do our best work and our most creative work because AI is doing some of the stuff that we didn't really want to get to anyway, that procrastination list. But the AI is working in the background to make us a lot less on the procrastination side.
Yeah. Well, a few things, Brian, in what you just shared that I do think is important for folks. The AI term has almost become this, it's like Kleenex, right? You use it for everything, right? Or Google, even like, hey, I'm going to Google it. Well, you might be using the Google search browser. You might not be, right? But folks know what that term means. But I think it's really important. There are automation capabilities, as you noted, from your HCM system, from your integrations between your HCM and other things that can help get rid of some manual activities that the people are doing. And that then frees up some time and effort to actually dig in to the AI use cases where maybe you need that time and effort to say, do we understand the data that's going to train the AI model? Do we understand the outcomes we're trying to drive, to your point, for the business? How am I going to go tell the business leader, hey, we want to use this AI coach or this AI tool, and why is that going to be good for your managers, and what does it mean for how your managers are going to be leading different? And so the balance of both that automation and AI capability together then helps you start to unlock value in maybe a different way than just one or the other, or chasing just AI for the sake of AI to a certain extent.
Yeah, that is a great summary of that, because I think one of the things that's really challenging for us in our field, bringing on AI coaches you just mentioned, is one of the more fun things I think will come around.
Yep.
I do believe that we'll have AI bosses at some point in time in the future.
Sure.
Your boss might be an AI down the road. That's not a scary thing, because your AI boss might be very sensitive and listen to all the things and remember your birthdays and be really engaging with you because it's figured it out and it learns from talking with you over and over again. I don't think that time is that far away. Maybe it's 10 years out, who knows? But eventually we'll have this world where the AI and the humans interact in such a way that it's very symbiotic. It'll start to feel like one thing versus multiple things.
Yeah.
And so it'll become more commonplace. And then we'll have AI natives that grow up, much like we have digital natives today.
Yep.
We'll have AI natives. We'll have kids that have been born that don't know anything else, and they'll always have AI as part of their life. It'll just be woven into how they see the world. So as we start to think about what could be, remember that out there at some point in time,
Yep.
there is a very small child today that will only know AI.
Yeah.
But today, for us in the workplace, we're just at the very, very, very beginning of what it could do.
Right.
And we're just kind of working through that. So we're going to have to be flexible, go through those use cases. And by the way, some of these are going to fail. So a lot of them are actually going to fail.
Yeah.
But the good part is, as you go through it and you learn from each of these failures, if you have a growth mindset, then you're able to take that and be able to do some really cool things with it. So I think this is a really exciting time. But I think your point is really good that we can't look at AI as the same thing as like we Google it or AI. It's different than that. And I think we have to stay alert and we have to be on top of it. But 10 years from now, we'll all be using AI in a way that we probably have never even imagined.
Yeah. Well, and Brian, I think what's really important, you've said a few things around have a growth mindset, don't fear it and lean into it, right? But HR professionals are being asked all the time, hey, where do I find this type of talent? Or how's the work changing? Or what's this technology trend, et cetera, right? And folks are probably feeling a little overwhelmed. So any practical advice that you would share for folks? How do they do the combination of staying ahead of the curve a little bit, right? Because you got to know what's coming to be ready for it, while also being grounded with the realities of connecting it to business outcomes and connecting it to what business leaders are going to want to see and hear from their HR counterparts?
Well, a couple things. One, learn from other people. One of the great things about the HR community worldwide is that people are willing to share, whether it's here at Transform or other conferences or just networks that you create yourself.
Yeah.
It is so important to be able to stay connected to others because they're going to go through a journey as well. And that journey might be different than yours, and you can learn from that and really think about how to take that and really learn quickly, but fail fast and move forward and understand that we're all out to help each other.
Yep.
This is too big of a change for us to go it alone. Sitting back in your corner late at night, trying to pound through it all, the world is too complex for that. AI is too complex for that. And then as you start to think about all the changes that are coming, not just from AI, but the world itself is going to change a lot. And as the world is going through those changes, we have to make sure as professionals that we get grounded in the things that we have to do because our jobs have changed a lot over time. I call it outside in. I used to be as a head of HR. It's all about policies and practices and you set up all your stuff and you get your little nice kind of sealed environment. This is the way we do it and this is the way they do it. And they all stay far apart. Today, you can't really do it that way. Today, the outside is in. The world is much more complex. So you have to be able to think about things that are happening outside of your doors and then how does that impact your company? And how do you start using, whether it's technologies or just trade situations that are around the world? The world is much more global than it used to be. And we're going through, I think by anybody's standards, around the world, politics have changed.
Sure.
And we didn't used to have to pay attention to it all that much in HR.
Sure.
Now we have to pay attention to it a lot. And so we're trying to understand that as well. And by the way, AI can help us run through some of that very quickly and understand what outcomes are. So think about scenario planning is what I try to do.
Yep.
I try to think of 4 or 5 different scenarios that are likely to happen. And then to try to figure out what would I do and what does our company do in those scenarios on there.
Right.
It actually helps because you can spar with AI to talk about these scenarios.
It's got access to all that real-time data or how you model it out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's great kind of practical advice for folks, Brian. And I think especially on the community, the network of folks that are out there, right? And not necessarily needing to go it alone. So one of those things I know that also contemplate in your chief people officer role is where you engage, right? Communities, other third parties. You've got vendors who are your technology advisors, outsourcing partners, professional services providers. What kind of perspective would you give to folks to think about how and where to lean into that type of ecosystem as well as another way to not necessarily go it alone?
Well, professional partnerships are extremely important because you have to be able to digest everything that's out there, but finding companies that have a wide range. One of the reasons I love working with Deloitte is because Deloitte picks up on trends very early because they have so many clients and they're all over the world and have experts in different fields that can come together. Because Deloitte works as a team, they're actually able to bring knowledge to companies like ours much more quickly. Therefore, we don't have to find every piece of information or try to understand everything that's out there. Deloitte helps to bring that forward. and present it in such a way that you can use it and digest it, but also be able to get fast learnings from what they've have experienced. And Deloitte generally shares those experiences pretty well. And I think that's important because it helps you sort kind of what's going on in the marketplace. But more than anything else, there's this knowledge base that they're going to have from touching so many clients and what their experience is that you can learn from as well. So those professional partnerships are extremely important to success.
Yeah. Well, and Brian, certainly appreciate that kind of call out for us. And I will say, even this podcast and the way that we've taken it from seasonal for the last several years to now a biweekly and bringing in chief people officers such as yourself to share insights with that broader community is part of how we at Deloitte are trying to bring some of that knowledge and insights out to folks in the market, given the array of organizations that we have the privilege of working with. So, Brian, thank you so much for joining us, taking a little bit of your time out of the Transform Conference to share with the Capital H audience your experience and insights on your path, on what it's like to build an HR function as part of a corporate carve-out, and some of the trends that are shaping the future of the HR profession. And folks, if I had 2 or 3 takeaways from you after listening to this conversation, from what Brian shared, one, there's that growth mindset piece at the intersection of leaning into community, right? There is a wide array of HR professionals and business leaders tackling these topics, lean into them through forums like Transform and others. 2, you need to unpack trends beyond the headline, right? There's this headline of AI, and then there's the realities of what can you automate with other capabilities, whether that's your HCM or your middleware or other, while you also grapple AI, right? And both of those need to be connected to the business strategy ultimately. And then number 3, if you embark on this corporate carve-out journey, make sure you've got your messaging clear with your workforce around the fact that things might go bump as you're a part of a new business, but there's an exciting new mission that you're organizing and driving, and that's really what you want to keep folks oriented around. So to our Capital H listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. Stay tuned for more conversations from Transform in Las Vegas. And Brian, thanks again for taking the time with us today.
Thanks, Cal. Appreciate it.
This podcast is produced by Deloitte. The views and opinions expressed by podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Deloitte. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice or services of any kind. For additional information about Deloitte, please go to deloitte.com/about.